Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Biology Daily Booster. This is number 12 in our Paper 2 series, and it is not listed on any of the advanced information for either foundation or higher biology. However, that does not mean that it won't come up as at least a question on the paper, so worth watching just in case. What we're going to be looking at in this part is all about producing food to meet the needs of our population. So what we're talking about is food security, the ability of human populations to access affordable food of sufficient quality and quantity. So that's our little definition to know for food security first of all. We've got some key things that threaten food security here. Firstly, the ever-increasing population of humans. The more people there are, the harder it is to feed them. Secondly, climate change. Obviously, as the climate changes, some areas are becoming less suitable for growing food. Thirdly, new pathogens or pests evolving, and then just the changing diets of the human population as well. We've got to try and meet all of those challenges in order to produce enough food to keep everyone well fed. In terms of what we can do to try to maximize our food production. First one, if we're talking growing plants, maximize photosynthesis. We tend to use these big greenhouses. They sometimes refer to them as glass houses, same thing as a greenhouse. And by doing that, we can control light intensity, temperature, water, everything is perfectly controlled to give them maximum photosynthesis. We can use fertilizers to replace any minerals that we've lost from the soil to maximize our yields. We can use a range of chemicals, herbicides, kills the weeds, fungicides, kills the fungi, insecticides, kills the insects, to remove competition and pests. And we can then use different varieties of crops that just have higher yields or are naturally resistant to certain pests. Quick recap on our chemicals that we can use. When we're looking at these, the key thing here is, if you look at the word, then they all end in side. That just means kill, okay? The thing in front tells us what we're killing. So fungicides kill fungi, pesticides kill pests, insecticides kill insects. Careful with this last one. Herbicides do not kill herbs, they kill weeds. But all of these are to do with improving the yield of the crop we get. We have two options for farming. Intensive farming is the go-to in modern times. This is using techniques to produce the maximum yield of food from a minimum area of land. So this is where we're going to use our chemical fertilizers and pesticides. We're going to do things that maximize animal growth rates, like keeping them inside relatively contained areas, making sure they've got heated areas, etc., so they're not wasting energy, keeping themselves warm, etc. And we're going to use a lot of machinery in order to work the land as well. Option 2, organic farming. These are using natural methods. So rather than using chemicals and machinery, it's more labour intensive because people tend to be going out pulling the weeds up rather than using a chemical to kill them. But you obviously produce the food that's not had the chemicals used on it. Intensive farming food will be cheaper, organic farming food will be more expensive, down to just the labour costs and the fact you get less per area of land from organic than you will intensive. If we talk about sustainable food production, this is producing food in ways that we can continue indefinitely. There are certain ways that we produce food that actually aren't going to work in the long term. Sustainable food production will allow this to continue, as far as we know, indefinitely. Now, these techniques are going to minimise the use of these fertilisers and pesticides. So what we're doing there is, instead of using chemical fertilisers, you spread manure, something that's natural. Rather than obviously relying on fertilisers, we can use the process of crop rotation so that gives our soil a chance to recover and prevents any particular pests or fungal infections from building up in that soil that would affect our crops. We'll be using some pest or disease resistant varieties of crop so that we don't need to use those chemicals. And we can use the process of biological control rather than pesticides. When we talk about biological control, this is just using natural predators of the pest species in order to control their numbers. So we breed large numbers of those predators, release them onto the crop, and in theory, they eat the pest. There are some problems with this though, because we are talking living things. Firstly, those predators that we've bred to eat the pests may just decide that they're going somewhere else and leave the area. It's a problem. And they may decide that actually they don't want to eat that pest, they want to eat that other insect instead. So your pest problem is still a problem. We can use some different techniques to try to give us enough food. And fish farming is one of these newer techniques, if you like. Fish are a great source of protein for a large number of people across the world. But where we've carried out a lot of overfishing over the years, there's been quite a significant reduction in populations of certain species. So what we now have are these fishing quotas that limit the number and types of fish that people can catch to try to protect those wild populations. So what we've actually developed, these fish farms, where we keep fish in cages which are located in seas or rivers, or now even these massive areas on the land itself. Whole purpose behind that is it's going to protect those fish from predators, and it makes it dead easy to catch. No longer are you going on a boat sailing out hoping to find the shoals of fish somewhere in the ocean. You go to where the actual cage is, the fish are there, so it makes it far easier to catch them. And that means if we're only taking from our cages, the wild populations can recover. There are some negatives. First of all, disease can spread quickly because they're obviously packed close together in a cage, and there is the risk of diseases spreading to wild populations if those cages are located obviously in seas or rivers. The wild fish can swim right up to the edge, and therefore diseases can spread there. Another new technique is hydroponics. Now, hydroponics is where we grow plants, but rather than growing them in soil, as we do normally, we're going to grow them in a solution that contains all the minerals they need. So because of that, we've removed soil altogether. So we can stack plants one on top of the other to maximize space because they don't have to be planted in the ground. We can grow these plants in areas where soil quality is quite rubbish because all they need is the right solution to put the plants in. One technique that we've been using for a long time now is selective breeding. When we talk about selective breeding, this is where we as humans have chosen animals or plants to breed together for a certain characteristic. So the example we've got there is looking at sheep. So we can see in the little picture that there are some sheep with lots of wool and others with not quite so much. So if we wanted woolly sheep, what we would do is we would pick the two circled ones with lots of wool, allow those two to breed together, and then in the next population we would then start picking out the ones with lots of wool, let those breed together, until over many generations we end up with a population consisting of very woolly sheep. 5 key steps to remember: identify the characteristic that you want, select the parents with high levels of that characteristic, breed them, select the best offspring and breed them again, repeat many generations. Now, obviously that does give us a large number of individuals with the characteristic we wanted, but it reduces variation in the gene pool. So we're reducing the number of potential alleles, which means they are more susceptible to disease. We're also increasing the risk of inheriting genetic disease because the vast majority of genetic diseases are recessive. So if you're making it so there's a smaller and smaller gene pool, the chance of those 2 recessive alleles making it into one organism increases each time. So that means there could be a greater amount of genetic diseases. Great example of that, think of dogs, all those real great pure breeds that we have and the number of genetic diseases that they now have. That's because we've been selecting from a very small number each time, narrowing the gene pool. Now, loads of problems. If there are bits you'd like to look at in more detail, obviously you can use the videos on the main channel on the B6 playlist. Use your own notes, your revision guides to go over those bits. Have a look at a past exam paper to get a feel for the questions. And then, of course, don't forget to join us again tomorrow for our next Daily Booster.